We are now live on YouTube. Chair McPherson, please go ahead.
I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting of August 10th, 2020 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul McPherson, Counselor and Chair of the Planning and Economic Development Committee. We are meeting electronically through Zoom, and this is our second Committee of the Whole meeting. During this declared emergency period, members of the public may observe the proceedings by accessing the live webcast of our YouTube or at our YouTube channel. I will ask our Deputy Clerk to complete a roll call of council so that we can confirm quorum. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Please unmute your mic as I call out your name. Mayor Easton.
Present.
Councilor Rinjma. You're on mute? You're on mute, Councilor.
Present.
Councilor Russell.
Here.
Councilor Brunei.
Present.
Councilor Pachariva.
I am here.
Councilor McPherson.
Here.
Councilor Mikulik.
Here.
Councilor Timmers.
Present.
Councilor Reimer.
Present.
We have all of council here.
In addition, I want to take a moment to welcome the staff we have joining us today electronically. Chief Administrative Officer Mike Kirkopoulos, Finance Treasurer Terry Tuola, Director of Planning and Development Kathleen Dale, Associate Director of Planning and Development Matt Bruder, the Director of Community Services Shannon McKay, the Associate Director of Community Services Sarah Ain, our Fire Chief Greg Hudson, the Economic Development Officer Paul Deaney, our Director of Public Works, Dave Graham, the Manager of Engineering Services, Walter Neubauer, our Cultural Development Coordinator, Jessica Wilson, and moderating and clerking the meeting today, we have our Deputy Clerk, Trish Sarnicki. IT staff in attendance is Matt Guadagnolo and Devin Linton. As this is a virtual meeting, I will ask that we follow some procedures during this electronic meeting. Should there be a connection or service disruption for the chair, or if quorum is lost, the chair and or clerk will call a 10-minute recess to reconnect and to regain quorum. If quorum is lost, the meeting will be adjourned. If connection is lost from the chair, the clerk will ask those in attendance to wait up to 10 minutes to provide the chair time to reconnect and resume the meeting. Otherwise, after that time frame, the vice chair will resume the meeting until the chair has reconnected and resumes their role. Each member of council who wishes to speak, please press the raise hand feature on your video call, and the clerk will track our speakers list today and invite you to speak when I open it for comments or questions. Also, when I finish reading a motion and announcing the mover, the clerk will then call out the vote by reading each member of council's name out loud. Please remember to take yourselves off mute during this portion of the meeting so that you can confirm if you support or oppose. Also, when not speaking, please remember to put yourself on mute. Moving to declarations of interest, are there any declarations of interest?
Councilor Mikulik.
Councilor?
You're on mute, Councilor.
You're on mute.
Thank you. With regards to report number PW-14-20, the Jordan Village Improvement Project, I reside and own 2 rental properties within the authored report.
Thank you, Councilor. So moving to the confirmation of agenda, it is requested that we consider the Community Services and Infrastructure agenda first as item 6, followed by the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda as item 7, and then the General Business and Finance agenda as item 8. Amending the order requires a majority vote. I will now ask our clerk to call out the vote. Trish, please go ahead.
Please unmute yourselves as I call out your name. Councilor Brunei.
Yes.
Councilor McPherson.
Yes.
Councilor Mikulik.
Yes.
Councilor Pachariva.
Yes.
Councilor Reimer.
Yes.
Councilor Rinjma.
Yes.
Councilor Russell.
Yes.
Counselor Timmers,
Yes.
Mayor Easton,
Yes.
and that is carried.
Thank you, Trish. Do members have any other amendments to the order of the agenda? Do you see any, Trish?
I do not.
Okay. We'll move to item 5 on the agenda, statutory public meetings. We have no statutory public meetings. Although there are no statutory public meetings occurring for this evening's committee of the whole meeting, staff have established procedures for the public to participate at future meetings. Information is available on our town website, and any future notices of public meetings will also provide direction on how the public can participate. As per the amended order council agreed to, we will now rotate to allow Councilor Rejima to assume the chair at this time for the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee agenda. Councilor Rejima.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. We have one delegation this evening for Community Services and Infrastructure Committee joining us by video. Please know that each delegation may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. The clerk will be notifying you when your time limit has been reached. Before we begin with the delegation, I know the CAO has a few comments to share. Mr. CAO, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do want to introduce Mr. Robinson and Mr. Salewich that are here from Niagara Region this evening. They will be giving you a brief presentation and talking about something that I think has been long awaited and that we've been waiting to start very patiently, and that is Niagara's new on-demand intermunicipal transit service. This is a pilot. Over the last number of weeks, I've shared with Council the coming together of a memorandum of understanding between the various parties. In this particular case, the Regional Municipality of Niagara and the Corporation of the Town of Lincoln. And within that agreement and memorandum, it does lay out roles and responsibilities. It lays out a number of the things that Mr. Robinson and Mr. Salewich will talk on this evening, but it also lays out things that I think were very important to Council, specifically around the pilot project itself, around the funding that the municipality receives through the provincial gas tax program, as well as what's to be expected through this program in terms of what Lincoln residents can come to expect as this pilot gets launched. And Matt, again, and Robert will go over this, but we look to be launching in the next number of weeks a communication campaign. We'll be going out very shortly, I think, starting after today's meeting. So without really further ado, I'll turn it over to Matt and Rob, and they can address any of the council's questions, as well as Director Graham or myself.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Our delegation this evening, I have in my script, I'm going to introduce them again. Our delegation this evening is Robert Salewich, Program Director, Transit Services, Niagara Region, and Matt Robinson, Director, Go Implement Office, Niagara Region, to delegate regarding Niagara Regional Transit On-Demand Information Update. Mr. Salewich and Mr. Robinson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity to be here. We're excited. It's an exciting launch. It's a long-awaited service, as Mr. Kirkopoulos has indicated. And I'm not sure if our 5 minutes started when Mike started talking or now. So I'm going to step aside and I'm going to let Mr. Salewich inform Council of the latest. And we are a week away. So we are in the home stretch. And with that, we're happy to take any questions after Robert's comments. So Rob, I'll pass it to you to share a few things.
And your 5 minutes started now.
Thank you for the clarification, Chair, and the opportunity to speak tonight. So again, I think it's been mentioned a couple of times, we're all getting very excited about this launch that's happening next week. So that's Monday, August 17th for the start of NRT On Demand. As Mr. Kirkopoulos mentioned, the MOU between the parties does outline a number of sort of roles and responsibilities between the parties that we think really strikes a nice balance between allowing the region to manage the terms of the contract, but at the same time giving the town of Lincoln the opportunity to decide whether or not it wants to continue on with that agreement for a second year, as our option with Via Mobility does have a second year opportunity for it. So really, I think the main point on that is their town is simply reallocating its existing transit spend to the region, and we'll be using that for the service. And during the period for which the pilot is happening, Niagara Region would file the gas tax with the province. If for some reason the project was to be terminated, or even just at the end of the 1 year that was to end, the town of Lincoln, all rights revert back to the town as far as filing its gas tax. That's part of the actual gas tax program. So, we've confirmed that that's the case with MTO, but also it's outlined explicitly in the MOU as well. And that's just, trying to give as much confidence as possible to the situation that once you make one decision now, that's not going to have any longstanding ramifications to your ability to file for that gas tax. The other piece is that the commitment is for a 1 year program. And I know, in a lot of cases with contracts, there's options for termination mid-year. But in this case, because Niagara Region already has a contract with Via that we had to sign in advance in order to prepare for all of this launch, the MOU outlines that Lincoln's commitment is for a 1 year period. At the end of that 1 year period, it's a mutually agreeable situation between the region and the local municipalities. Of course, Lincoln is included in that, to determine whether or not there wants to be an extension of the program. So, we can't deliver that local service without you. And we're handling the intermunicipal side. So there's a good opportunity for you there. We are just days away from the app being live. We just heard back from Via Mobility that they've sent the information over to Google and Apple. So as soon as they confirm the app itself, the app will be live. And we were waiting to launch the website for really the same reason. We don't want to have any dead links available on the website. So we want to make sure that people, when they see it, they can click here to go to the Apple Store, and it will in fact take them to the app. So we're just waiting for that to happen. But the vehicles have started to arrive. 8 of them arrived in Pelham today, and they're at the MCC for anybody that wants to take a trip and see them. We have them there. We've landed items with all of the locals, the local municipality transit providers in Niagara Falls and St. Catharines and Welland and Port Colborne, so that riders who are beginning their journey in West Niagara will have the opportunity to transfer to services in those municipalities as well. And there's really a ton of work that has gone on in the background that Matt and I have been very lucky to have a great team in getting us going. And I'm sure there would be a ton of specific questions that the council may have. So I really don't want to try and guess them all, and would rather use the time to give you the opportunity to ask what specific questions are on your mind, and we can do our best to answer them for you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move over to the question presentation. Are there any questions from council?
We have Councillor Brunei.
Go ahead, Councillor Brunei.
Thank you, Chair Rinjema. Through you to Mr. Salowich. So Robert, there's obviously, since the last time you and Matt were in front of us as council, there's been some changes, none of the least, which is COVID. So I'm just wondering, I believe when we had the presentation that the vans that we are going to be using were Mercedes Sprinter vans, and I see now we're using Toyota. I'm wondering if you could just comment on that change.
Through you, Chair. Absolutely, I can comment. That was a multi-pronged change. The first of all, that all started with COVID. And so when COVID shut basically everything down, the vehicle manufacturers shut down as well. And that changed the timelines as far as receiving vehicles that would enable us for launch. And during that time, we did a little additional digging, and it turns out that the Mercedes vans that Via has deployed elsewhere are rear-wheel drive vehicles. And given the Canadian climate and the geography of the escarpment, staff determined that that was not going to be the best fit for that situation. And rather than, have it come back to bite us later and view it as an oversight, we made the change to go ahead with the Toyota Siennas in the meantime. We did evaluate other vehicles too, the Honda Odysseys, the Chrysler Pacificas, the Dodge Caravans. We kind of went through the whole gamut of them, and we were able to save a little bit of money, a small amount off the top, but basically it ended up being a safety item that we only really found because COVID gave us some extra time to look at that.
Great, thank you very much for that. Through you, Madam Chair, can I just ask couple more questions?
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, again, when we last sat with you and Matt, I believe we knew at that time that Pelham was in for sure, and we were endorsing it. I think at the time Grimsby was still on the fence, but it's my understanding now that that Pelham, West Lincoln, Grimsby, ourselves in Wainfleet, are we all in? And if the answer to that is yes, I'm wondering, you mentioned earlier that we have 8 vans that have arrived at the MCC in Pelham. Is that where they're going to be headquartered? In other words, my question is, so if someone in Lincoln is calling for a van, where are the vans being dispatched from, and what is the estimated time now that we have 5 municipalities in this and not 2 or 3 like we had maybe thought when we got in?
Through you, Chair. So a little bit of clarification is in order, Councillor. There was always, Niagara Region was always going to provide services, intermunicipal or regional services, to all 5 municipalities. So from that perspective, everybody was always going to at least get that level of service. They're always going to be able to go from their home municipality to another municipality. Where we've brought others in with us is yourselves with Pelham and with Grimsby, only those 3, and you have the opportunity to use the service within your own municipality. So Wainfleet doesn't get that same benefit. Somebody can't run to Marshville Chocolates and back using the service, but somebody in Lincoln can make a local trip. So from that perspective, the number of vehicles hasn't needed to change. One of the things when we started out with our demand projections is that we found if we run a separate intermunicipal service as well as local services in each of your municipalities, we can gain efficiencies by aggregating those trips together, and we don't require additional vehicles. So when we started down this path in planning for vehicles, we planned that you would all be involved. And in fact, we planned that Wainfleet and West Lincoln would come in as well. So the number of vehicles that we have, the 10 plus 1 spare, is actually enough to provide both local and intermunicipal services for all 5 municipalities. So it's actually been scaled back a little bit from that perspective. So the wait time should be quite good. The service is set at a 1 hour maximum wait time. Based on our projections and simulations, it's likely to be more like 20 to 30 minutes on average. Now, certainly peak times in the morning and afternoon might play with that average a little bit, but overall, that's what you can expect. As far as the vehicles being stored in Pelham, that is our initial location, but the vehicles don't really get dispatched from there. When they start the day, the drivers show up early and they do a little bit of spreading out. So vehicles aren't going to go back there and park and wait for somebody to make a request for a call and then have to go back out again. The natural process of aggregating those trips based on the requests that people are making will keep vehicles where they're most likely, or not most likely being used, where they're most frequently being used. So you will, in all likelihood, see vehicles very frequently being in your municipality, in Pelham and in Grimsby. And if somebody in Wainfleet or West Lincoln needs a trip, a vehicle will be dispatched, so to speak, out to that area. So it's likely that they'll see the longer end of those wait times as opposed to a municipality where residents want to make local trips as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. I appreciate that very much. I just have one more question, and I'm sure it's all going to be in the communication once that's rolled out, but for our residents that are listening or will be listening, we are still in the midst of COVID. We're in stage 3, but we're wearing masks. So obviously, if these are, and I'm just throwing out a number, if they are normally an 8-passenger van, maybe could you just explain during COVID? Obviously, we've got a driver driving the vehicle. How many passengers are safely going to be positioned in a van with proper spacing while we're still in COVID?
Through you, Chair. Thank you. That's a great question. So with the regional bylaw, the mask bylaw that passed, transit was included in that. So masks are mandatory on the vehicles, and masks are to be used at times where social distancing is not possible. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag in this case. In the rear portion of the vehicle, we'll call it, there is no immediate limitation. We do have, for the first couple of weeks until September 7th, when all of transit in Niagara is going back up to full capacity, we'll be operating at half capacity. So for those 3 weeks or so. But as of September 7th, we put together a timeline with the Intermunicipal Transit Working Group, and all of them, St. Catharines, Welland, Niagara Falls, etc., we're all moving back to full capacity as of September 7th. Now, that said, there are plexiglass or plastic barriers that do separate the front and the rear of the vehicle, so that front passenger space is not going to be used for passengers. To be frank, I'm not sure that in the next year we'll ever get to the point where that vehicle can be used, but we will certainly play it by ear and see how things are going along with COVID and the numbers in Niagara and that sort of thing. But so the drivers will be in front of the plastic barrier. That means they will not need to be wearing a mask while driving. But if they are going to, help somebody with a wheelchair access the vehicle, they would in fact be wearing a mask, because at that time they would no longer be able to maintain that physical distancing. The vehicles. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for both you and Matt for being part of a delegation this evening and bringing us up to speed on this launch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. And who's next on the speaking list?
It looks like Councillor Mikulik.
Go ahead, Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to thank the president for coming and giving this presentation. I'm excited for this on-demand transit. I'm anxiously waiting for it. I think it's great for this area. With regards to the promotion and advertising of this project or this initiative, is there going to be any further expectation from the municipality to fund the advertising or the promotion of this, or is this all included in that gas tax that we've reassigned?
Thank you, through the chair. So that question is quite easy. You've already paid your money, so to speak. The amount that we told you, the amount that you already allocated for transit covers everything. One of the things that COVID has done for us is made us take a second look at the way that we'll be promoting. And originally we had thought, we were going to start off with sort of a sprint and do lots of promotion before launch and get everybody revved up and then launch. And with COVID and some conversations with VIA, they cautioned against that and suggested that we transition more to a marathon of promotion. So the website will be coming online, a media release is going out, we'll be doing some social media promotions to start, but then some of the more traditional promotions will start. We'll be in some of the local newspapers and have some different ads that are going out. Then the paid digital marketing will start on top of that. There are some signs going up at different grocery stores and the like around the municipalities. And we had originally planned for a really robust community engagement where regional staff and local brand ambassadors were going to need to be out sort of pounding the pavement as much as possible to get the word out about this program. But with COVID, we've had to drastically scale back the number of locations that we can go. So for the first 3 weeks or so, we've got a couple of locations, different farmers markets, a few convention centers or community centers. But really, we're going to be reevaluating when we can go and where we can go throughout the year. So there might be another one in the fall, another one in the spring, and potentially even the summer, just really depending on where we are COVID-wise and the reopening and the recovery process.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer. That's really good to hear. I mean, I like the social media aspect. I think a lot of people are connected and retweeting and sharing. And my world is free, and I like the word free.
Yeah.
One more question, Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Branding of the vehicles and the decals and the appearance of them. Maybe it's just me, but like when I see these acronyms, these short terms, like I think the logo is fantastic. I take a look at it and I see a lot in it, but it's called NRT on, but you really have to look at it to know what that brand is. Is there any consideration or plan or thoughts to have transit to allow people that don't understand or know what NRT demand stands for, so that they know, at a quick glance, with a van going 80 kilometers an hour, to know that it's a transit vehicle?
Through you, Chair. So the branding was a challenge, I guess I'll say. We went through a number of iterations, and I can certainly appreciate, the perspective that you're sharing on that. I think what happened is originally we had Niagara Region Transit on Demand, but that becomes quite a mouthful every time you sort of have to say it. And trying to brand a vehicle that way ended up being, this sort of all-encompassing logo. It wasn't even a logo anymore at that point, and we did. So we had a number of different iterations of what we could call it. We had some reservations even initially using the NRT portion, because typically we do use the full Niagara Region Transit name as opposed to an acronym of NRT. But we did try and bring in a number of other elements. So the arrow that's included in the logo is the same arrow, just flipped from the Niagara Region Transit logo. The colors that we chose are from the Moving Transit Forward branding. That's been sort of the hallmark of the transit consolidation process over the past 2 or so years. So, we try to bring in some of those familiar elements in order to do it. But you're right, in some cases there were sacrifices that needed to be made, I guess we'll say, and the actual word transit was one of them.
Thank you for that answer. I just want to make sure, I just really like to make sure that, the regular person on the street knows that it's a transit vehicle, that is a public transit vehicle, that they're aware that they can ride. The way it is right now, I without knowing the acronym, I don't know if I would know what that vehicle exactly is if I hadn't seen it before, or if I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in right now. So that would be the only thoughts that I have. But if I'm alone in thinking that way, then go with the majority. So thank you very much.
Chair, if I may just add one very quick comment to that. It's our intention that the last way you'll be finding out about the service is simply by seeing the vehicle, and that through our different marketing and promotions and community engagement, that our respective communities will know what the service is and what the vehicles are for. So I do understand absolutely what you're saying, but our goal is to make those a very small percentage of people who would be seeing it or hearing about it for the first time just by seeing the vehicle.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on the list.
Councillor Timmers.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Chair Regima. Through to the delegation, thank you very much, Robert and Matt, for being here this evening. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to see this thing roll out. You know, we saw ULink in the town of Lincoln, and it was a very successful pilot. We had a lot of people riding it. A lot of people got used to riding it, and they are looking forward to it, to having this service back again. I know it's been missed, although during COVID wouldn't be a time that they'd be riding, but I did look for the app today, but you already answered that, it's coming. So I was a little premature trying to load that. I have a question around children riding. Is there a different rate for children? Or are they paying the same?
Through you, Chair. So children under 5 are free. So it's currently the same rate as the existing Niagara Region Transit or even local transit services in other municipalities. So there will be some future discussion, certainly not to put the cart before the horse, about aligning the age of children along with what Metrolinx has done, and that children under 12 ride free. But we weren't there at this point in time right now, so we ended up sticking with our previous portion of children under 5.
Thank you. I'm just asking that question because I know a lot of the riders that we had using ULink were moms with young children. So I kind of foresee that would pick up again as well, people who don't have a vehicle of their own. So I think that would be very good if children under 5 are free. I don't have any other questions at this time, just thrilled, can't wait to see it roll out. So thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Who's next on the list? Trish?
Mayor Easton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Matt and Robert. This is it is really very exciting to be able to see this evolve in the way that it has. And I just have a couple of questions. I noted that you have an advisory committee, and could you just quickly speak, Robert, about who is that? Who makes up that? Because I'm then going to ask you a question about how what the process is for complaints. I hate to be negative, but it's just something that I think we need to have some better understanding of.
Through you, Chair, absolutely. So as far as the advisory, I'm not sure if it was the Intermunicipal Transit Working Group. Is that the one that you were referring to, or was there another name specifically of a committee? We also do have the Linking Niagara Transit Committee, which advises Public Works on transit issues at the region, but I wasn't too sure as to what advisory committee you were referring to.
Well, maybe I probably didn't have the name right, but why don't you tell me, who was the group that helped you formulate all the different elements of this that weren't technically connected to another discipline like engineering?
Through you, Chair. So I would say overall, it's the Intermunicipal Transit Working Group. We take a lot of cues at the region from those local partners, and they have memberships from all of the municipalities across Niagara, whether they have transit services or not. And we typically rely, as I said, quite heavily on those established services in Niagara Falls and St. Catharines and Welland to really weigh in and give us some information on how they run some of their other services. Some of them have had Transcab services in the past. They all have specialized transit services as well. And then even beyond that, we reached out to our own accessibility committee in order to get a handle on their view of a service like this. And of course, they were very supportive as well, as the vehicles are going to have accessibility options as well as bike racks. So, it really does sort of cover mobility for a range of needs. And so we tried to reach out to as many different areas as we can. We attended the West Lincoln Age Friendly Committee invited us out for a presentation and gave us some feedback. So, and we also spoke with the region's Youth Advisory Committee as well. So, I would hope to say that it's been a pretty fulsome process of us asking not just people who do it professionally, but people who are weighing in and giving those opinions, from a committee's perspective as well.
Okay, that's great. So what is the process for complaints? Who do complaints go to?
Through you, Chair. So complaints are initially, they go through the customer service representatives for VIA. And they have dedicated staff to the Niagara deployment. Although they are at a call center in the United States, they do not share multiple deployments. So they're not also covering Texas and also covering California or anything. We have our own dedicated staff for that who have been trained on some Niagara specific elements as well as the contract. But in the same way that with Niagara Specialized Transit, as you may know, we contract that service out to another company in Ontario. And while the first level of complaint or escalation goes to them, if riders or residents find that they're not getting the answers they need, they have the opportunity to escalate those to the region. And so we keep a separate number on our transit phone number that allows people to get in touch with us to address those. And then we can take them to VIA on their behalf, the same way we do it with Niagara Specialized Transit now.
Okay, Madam Chair, my next question is around, it's actually section 2.3, section B, where it speaks to the right to provide intermunicipal transit in the form of pilot project. And I was interested to know, does this imply that we exclude any other Uber type, any other on-demand, or even any other private service? Or do we understand that people still have the option to call any of those companies if they wish?
Through you, Chair, my understanding is there's nothing in that memorandum of understanding that precludes a resident or a company from operating in any of the municipalities that are covered by this program. This was simply a combination of the fact that Niagara Region provides or has a jurisdiction to provide intermunicipal transit, but we have non-exclusive jurisdiction. So your own municipality could provide intermunicipal trips if it wanted to as well. So there's no restriction from my perspective.
Okay, and then lastly, Madam Chair, I'm interested to know, Robert, if there was a termination of our partnership, the agreement, I'm just interested to know what reasons are usually, what are the normal reasons for that relationship breaking down?
Through you, Chair, I'm not too sure how to answer that one because I feel like it would be speculation, really. But I would say for any contract to be terminated, if the terms of the agreement were not being delivered as they are listed in the agreement, then that would be grounds for termination. But I also think with any agreement or any program, you take the first steps are trying to work through any dissatisfaction and find solutions for them, as opposed to saying, well, you didn't meet term A, so we're done. It's, what is it about term A that wasn't satisfactory and how can we fix that? So, I certainly don't suspect, and frankly, I can't really see any reason, especially given that we're launching on the tail end of the round one of COVID-19 anyway, that there would be a termination. We want to make sure that we're providing this service for residents making intermunicipal trips, but also local trips as well, which is, why we came to you with the opportunity for partnership in the first place.
Absolutely. And there's no question, Madam Chair, that there's an equality to this when you live in a rural community to be able to offer the service well beyond what we could have ever managed on our own. Also, I think the quality of what you presented to us, the turnaround time, all of these things are so valuable, and I am also very excited about this and looking forward to the process going forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Who's next on the speakers list, Trish?
Councillor McPherson.
Go ahead, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Rob and Matt, for joining us tonight. Just a couple of quick questions, and apologize if I'm repeating somebody else's question as I was kicked off the call for a little while. But with regards to COVID and with regards to expected times for people to get picked up. I'm assuming that there's going to be a fairly stringent COVID protocol that these cabs, these vans are going to have to follow as far as cleanliness after a passenger leaves the vehicle, as well as the number of passengers that you can put in a vehicle. So if you could speak to that potentially impacting the turnaround time for a van to go then and pick up another person. And I'm assuming that we're going to see hopefully a somewhat busy time over the fall.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. So I would say that, and we did address it. Unfortunately, it sounds like you did miss some of it, but we can give a little bit. We can give a little recap, no problem at all. So the way that the cleaning is going to work is that the vehicles will be professionally cleaned every other day, and that's a deep cleaning from a contracted local company. The drivers themselves will also be giving the vehicles I'm not sure if a wash down or a scrub down or a wiping is the right term, but they'll be using sanitizer or bleach to wipe the vehicles down. But they don't do it in between every passenger, because this is still public transit. And although we don't have any routes that we need to maintain, we do still have a service expectation that we need to maintain. And VIA is on contract to maintain that 1 hour maximum wait time. So at the beginning and the end of their shift, it will be wiped down. There's usually 2 to 3 drivers throughout the course of a day. So the vehicle will get a wipe down a couple of times a day, and then we'll get professionally cleaned every other day as well. And those are added costs that Niagara Region just absorbed because of the COVID situation. And we certainly didn't feel that it was appropriate to come back to your municipality and ask you for additional funding after we had already talked about what the funding contribution would be. As far as passengers, there's a plastic barricade separating the front and the rear of the vehicle, so that front passenger space will not be used by a rider for the foreseeable future. And however, in the rear of the vehicle, because it's a transit vehicle, the mandatory mask bylaw is in effect, and social distancing is not possible, which is why you're required to wear the mask in the vehicle at that time. So for the first 3 weeks, they'll be operating at half capacity. Until September 7th, it will go back up to, we'll say, full capacity, excluding that front passenger seat. And that's in alignment with the Intermunicipal Transit Working Group throughout Niagara. Everybody is moving back to full capacity on every transit vehicle as of that date. It's probably worth mentioning that many municipalities in Ontario never reduced their capacity at all. So the fact that we did in Niagara was, just an extra step that we tried to take. But, frankly, it's necessary to start moving back to more regular capacities.
Okay, thank you, Robert, and I apologize if I did repeat a previous question. Madam Mayor, if I may, just one quick question, and it's with regards to a little bit of odd geography within the town of Lincoln, and I'm hoping that you have taken into account that we have about 3 roads on the east side of our town that are actually St. Catharines addresses. So when getting a call from any of those folks from 9th or 11th or whatever the streets are, 13th, I'm expecting that there's some kind of way that those calls will be accepted, and that those calls will be recognized as a town of Lincoln resident. If you could speak to that.
Through you, Chair. So this isn't something that that we were aware of. We hadn't heard anything from staff. However, I think the way that we set it up is whoever you pay your taxes to is how that's done. And I know we had similar challenges when we had specialized transit that was based on zones. You might have an address, the exact same situation. You have an address that says one thing, but you pay your taxes to another. And we worked around that situation. So I certainly expect that we will quickly work towards a solution, but I will make a note here for myself to double check that and see where we have that boundary and if we need to add a bit of a buffer or something to it so that we can ensure that those residents are included without a challenge or an issue along the way.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Who's next on the speakers list? Trish, I think there's only just one left at the moment.
Just
Coun-
one, Councillor Russell.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chairman Gemma. Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Matt, for participation. I've got just 3 logistical questions. One that I asked in one of our earlier meetings, so I'm going to come back to it because I think it was a takeaway for you. So the first one is your service hours go up until 10 p.m. Does that mean that if I were to book a ride on the app at 9:59, that would still be honored, or do the vehicles stop running after the fares are essentially just past 10? Like, how would that work as far as the time management goes?
Through you, Chair. So I would like to say we leave it a little bit flexible in that sense. It's really supposed to be that anything booked more or less before 10 would be serviced. But I think for the sake of the passengers, they tend to add a 5 or 10 minute buffer. So it sort of, they stop taking requests sort of just prior to 10. But once 10 o'clock comes around, if you're on the vehicle, they don't pull over and ask you to disembark, right? So from that perspective, it's the same thing as our conventional service. The last time that the vehicles depart are typically 10, but by the time those vehicles are dropping off the last passengers and getting back to the yard, it's 11 o'clock or onward. So we expect the same situation here.
Okay. Thank you. A couple more questions, Madam Chair. Again, just looking at your map. So, and this is my question from earlier. So, a resident from Lincoln gets dropped off at the hub in St. Catharines. It's only a one-way. There's no way to pick them up, or is that what the transfer ticket is for?
No, through you, Chair. So the transfer ticket allows that person, if they desire or require, to board either a Niagara Region Transit conventional bus or a St. Catharines Transit local bus as well. The way that they would get back is they would pay the fare on whatever bus they got on. So let's use St. Catharines as your example. Maybe they're in the north end. They get on a local bus, but they pay the same $6 regional fare and ask for a transfer. They will be given a transfer, and when they get back to the bus terminal, they will make a request for a vehicle and in the app, there's an option that says transfer ticket. And when they select that, the driver knows that they have to look for that transfer ticket from the rider. So there are ways to get to and from. When you're coming back, though, you're not booking your trip until you're already back at the terminal.
Okay. No, thank you. That's I just want to make sure that our residents weren't going to be stranded with a one-way passage to one of those transit hubs. My last question through you, Madam Chair, is how far in advance, and I think I asked this to the CAO earlier or late last week, how far in advance can you book an appointment? Is it, or a pickup, is it only the day of, or can you schedule advanced pickups?
Through Chair, at this point in time, it's an on-demand service only. So it's the day of, and it's really not even, 5 or 6 hours in advance. It's when you require the service, you make the request for the booking. And the way that the app works is it will usually give you 2 different options. So if a vehicle is really close, say, it might say, we'll be there in 7 minutes, or it can route another vehicle there for you in 20. So, maybe you weren't sure, you hadn't, finished getting dressed or something, but you punched in the app, you sort of get a little bit of leeway that way. We did discuss some of the opportunities for pre-bookings, but at this point, we know how pre-booking services work. Our specialized transit service is pre-booking. And when you do pre-booking services, you can't offer that same day level of service. And that's what we really wanted to test here, is to give people the freedom to say, yes, I would like to go meet you for a coffee in, 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Not, no, sorry, the only transit is booked 2 or 3 days in advance, or they're full, I can't come till Friday, that sort of thing. So we landed on that for a reason. In the future, it's one of the pieces that we're going to be evaluating is, did that work for residents? Did we enable enough people to use it sort of same day, or was it more arduous and they rather would have just pre-booked and saved those coffee trips to, you know, catch a ride with a friend instead?
Oh, thank you very much. Again, I think that that day of booking is going to eliminate some of those potentialities for, again, like I'm thinking like people that want to have their kids dropped off at school. They might reside outside of a transit or a normal bus route, and they want to take advantage of this on a regular basis. And I think this, having it to book it on demand, again, it gives you some of that flexibility with the time and maybe eliminate that kind of behavior. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I see Councillor Pachariva has his hand up. I don't know if there's anybody else. Trish?
No, you're correct, Councillor Pachariva.
Go ahead, Councillor Pachariva.
Thank you, Chairman Chima. Thanks, Robert and Matt, for coming. Now, I think this is just going to be wildly successful, so I'm going to jump in the blue sky realm. New Year's Eve special events. Any possibilities of extending the time limits on those? So, you know, New Year's Eve, it goes till 10 o'clock. Anything there yet, guys? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but knowing, you know, regional transit and things like that. So
through you, Chair, what I will say is that nothing's ever off the table if it's something that benefits the residents. The one thing I will say is we had talked about extending Friday night and Saturday night hours to try and facilitate some of that, honestly, that later crowd that might be out or might be using the wineries or drinking or, you know, that sort of thing. But currently, with where we were in the COVID situation, we just didn't feel right about starting off with the service that way. But those types of tweaks and changes are one of the things that drew us to VIA, is that if we want to make those changes, we can make those changes.
okay, that's fantastic, because I mean, I think the sky's the limit for this, and it's really going to provide connectivity to our residents that just the fixed route didn't. So, you know, thinking Canada Day at Charles Daly Park, and a family wants to get there, but they don't have a vehicle. And it's just those little tweaks that we can make going forward. So I see it as a, you know, if you know, build it and they will come. So I appreciate that, Robert and Matt. Thank you very much. Look forward to having those tweaks and having these vehicles full. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pachariva. I think Councillor Mikulik is next. Is that right, Trish?
That's correct.
Go ahead, Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Chair Rinjema, for allowing me another chance to talk. I just, hearing Councillor Timmers earlier, do we know what the age limits, or what is the minimum age to ride the transit? Is there accompanied by an adult? It might be just a quick question. How old do you have to be to ride the bus in the van unsupervised?
Through you, Chair, I believe the age for that is 13, is unsupervised. The same way that you could go get on a transit bus, really the same way. All of the vehicles are GPS tracked in the same manner that transit vehicles are as well. And all of the drivers are screened, have background checks, have had training, are licensed in order to operate the vehicle. So, I mean, from that perspective, you know, I know it does sound a little bit different because it's a passenger vehicle, but it really is just an extension of public transit. So where those other policies apply, we've applied them to the service as well.
And thank you for that. And one more thing, is there cameras inside the van as well, supervising activity?
Through you, Chair, I do not believe that there are cameras inside the van at this time.
Okay. Has that been considered, or has that been thought of?
Through you, Chair, so it has been considered. There is a larger technology platform being discussed at the IMT working group. And so nobody is going ahead with technology changes until we are all aligned with that, given the work that's being done on the consolidation front. And so for the term of this pilot, at least the first term of the pilot, we were not able to, you know, get that started. But when we start talking about year two, if there's a year two, and depending on where the governance discussion is, it's still something that we can discuss.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mikulik. I don't think there's any more questions from council, so I want to thank you very much for coming and speaking to us and explaining to us more about the launch of this exciting program. I sit on two different committees that are both very excited for similar and different reasons of their own. One being the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee and the other being the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce. Very excited to get this service going for different reasons. So it's nothing but positivity that I'm hearing, and I'm very happy about it.
Excellent.
Great.
So this concludes the delegations portion of the agenda, and I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachariva that council receive and file as information the delegation from Robert Salowich, Program Director, Transit Services, Niagara Region, and Matt Robinson, Director, GO Implementation Office, Niagara Region, regarding Niagara Regional Transit On-Demand Information Update. I will now ask our clerk to call the vote.
Please unmute yourselves as I call out your name. Councillor Brunei,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Mikulik,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva. You're on mute, Councillor
I know
Pachariva.
that. Yes. Couldn't find it.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Njima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
Mayor Easton,
Support.
and that motion is carried.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next portion of the agenda is the consent agenda. We are now considering the consent agenda, which includes library board minutes from January 21st, 2020, the library board minutes from February 18th, 2020, the library board minutes from April 21st, 2020, and the library board minutes from May 19th, 2020, and also the age-friendly minutes from February 6th, 2020. Would any member like to remove any of these items from the consent agenda to discuss? Trish, do I see Councillor McPherson's hand up?
Chair, you're correct.
Okay, Councillor McPherson. What item is it that you'd like to lift to discuss?
It is the library board minutes from February 18th, 2020.
Okay, Councillor McPherson, the floor is yours.
So under item 9.1, new business, it's on page 44 of our agenda. It speaks to the elimination of fax service at the Vineland branch. And my question, maybe through you, Madam Chair, to the CAO is, do we look at our library system holistically, and do we consider services that are provided at one branch being provided at the other branch? I hope I'm not losing you now.
You're pretty good. You faded
Okay,
out for a
good.
second, but I think
Yeah.
I think we heard you.
So through to the CAO, when looking at fax, this happens to be fax and a service provided, and in the minutes it speaks to that service being provided at the Fleming Center for those that want it, and also that the local Avondale is available. And I'm just questioning whether that's the message we're wanting to send to our residents of the Vineland branch.
So through you, Madam Chair, if I could, because I think the councillor directed that question through to me. From the perspective of the town, councillor, because we are, as I think, geographically separated as we are oftentimes when we do have facilities, whether they be those that are in the east and the west, we have tried historically definitely to provide services at both to allow our residents to have that access and that ease of access. I know there's some services that we're unable to do in that fashion, but typically, to answer your question, councillor, we do try to provide those services geographically to both and all sectors and parts of our community.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I like to hear that. You know, I'm looking at this similar to our transit system, and that, you know, it's provided across the entire town, and not every location is going to have riders every day. So, you know, when we look at the cost of our library, I would hope that we're looking at it holistically, the two branches, when looking at services that are provided. So thank you, Mr. CEO, for that response.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Who's next on the list, Trish?
Councillor Pachariva.
Go ahead, Councillor Pachariva.
Yeah, thank you, Chair and Jim. I'd just like to chime in on Councillor McPherson's question. And as you know, we're the library board is in place to administer the operation of all library operations, and we take our kind of guidance, marching orders per se, much like we do at the town here, from the CAO. So the CAO makes recommendations. You can see it's a loss of $675, which would be much better spent going towards reading materials, going towards learning materials, going towards programming. Fax service is still available. Not a lot of people use faxes anymore. The technology is changing. The document would be scanned, would be sent to the Fleming branch, and would be faxed from there if need be. So, we're constantly looking. The goal of the board is to examine the way we do business. I look at it the same as a fire station. We don't need 4 aerial trucks because we have 4 stations. What we need to do is we need to utilize the technology we have at our fingertips and deliver the service the best way we can. And Councillor Russell and myself both sit on the library board, and we are constantly tasking our CAO, how can we do things better? And you'll also see, if you've read in the minutes too, that we're looking to get a better cost on internet service at the Rittenhouse Library. We want it more effective. We want it more costly in a timely fashion, and take it from there. So constant improvement, constant doing better, constant looking at how we can make the dollars that go to the library board be spent in the best way possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pachariva. I believe Councillor McPherson is next. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a response, and I'm not questioning anything to do with cost control. That is ultimately what we all want to accomplish. My concern is that we're not doing it across the board. If we're going to eliminate fax, let's eliminate it in Fleming, and let's eliminate it at MFR. Let's provide the services that we choose to provide at both branches. That's where I'm coming from. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Trish, who is next?
I see Councillor Pachariva's hand up.
Councillor Pachariva, did you want to say something, or did you? Down it goes. Okay, so I don't think we have any more comments or questions on this. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer that Council receive for information the library board minutes from February 18th, 2020, and that's the item that was just lifted and discussed. Trish, can you call the vote, please?
Absolutely. Please unmute yourselves as I call your name. Councillor Brunei.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Mikulik.
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva.
Yes.
Councillor Reimer.
Yes.
Councillor Rinjema.
Yes.
Councillor Russell.
Yes.
Councillor Timmers.
Yes.
Mayor Easton.
Yes.
And that is carried.
Thank you, Trish. So next on in the agenda, I have a motion to pass the remaining consent agenda items. Moved by Councillor Reimer And the motion reads, I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer to pass the remaining items on the consent agenda. I will now ask our clerk to call the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Brunei,
Support.
Councillor McPherson. You're on mute.
Got it. Yes.
Councillor Mikulik,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Rijima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
and Mayor Easton.
Support.
And that is carried.
Thank you, Trish. Madam Clerk, does that take care of all the items on the consent agenda?
It does, Chair Rijima.
Thank you. So I'll move on to reports. We will now consider report item 6.7. It's a report PW 1420, the Jordan Village Improvements Project Update. Our Director of Public Works, Dave Graham, has a few comments to share. Mr. Graham, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, and to members of council. The purpose of this report tonight is to provide an update on the Jordan Village Improvement Project. There's no decisions of committee required, and it's basically an information report. I'd also like to note as well that as we move forward, council can expect to see more detailed information on this project as we enter the 2021 budget process this fall. You'll be seeing more on this project. So staff are very excited to see this important project for the community move towards the construction phase. We want to share some of that information with committee tonight. Both Walter Neubauer, our manager of engineering, who he's worked very closely on this project, and along with myself, are more than happy to answer any questions committee may have on the report. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Graham. Do members of council have any questions or comments for Mr. Graham or Mr. Neubauer on this report? Who was first, Trish?
Councillor Brunei was, Chair Rijima.
Please go ahead, Councillor Brunei, Vice Chair Brunei.
Thank you, Chair Rinjima. Through you to Director Graham. So yes, I read in the report, Mr. Graham, that currently detailed design phase is nearing completion. It goes on to say that staff and IBI are finalizing the selection of surface, beautification, and landscaping materials. It goes on to say then further that we hope to have detailed design completed by Q4 2020. And you mentioned that we hope to have further discussion as we go into the capital budget of 2020. So I appreciate this update. One of my concerns, and I want to flag it, is that we had talked through many of the presentations that we sat through. I'm just going to mention a few landmarks, like a lighthouse at the entrance to one of the ends of the beautification, and we also talked about blue concrete. I just want to make sure, when I read something that staff and IBI are finalizing selection of surfaces, beautification, and landscaping materials, I just want to ensure through you, Director Graham, that the council is really, part of this process, and that we're not lost in that process. I do, understand that detailed design is still being discussed, but similarly to what we've experienced in some other projects, I just want to make sure that we are involved in those discussions. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much for the update.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Brunei. Who is next on the list, Trish?
Councillor Pachariva.
Go ahead, Councillor Pachariva.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question to, I guess through the CAO, about utility relocation status. So I'm very, very, very pleased to see that this is part of the project. I hearken back to the miss that we had on Mountain Street in Beamsville between King and Beam. But I see in the report that the qualified contractor should be in place by August and then construction to begin. I get that we're in a pandemic, but I think we need to be a little bit better given these works and trying to schedule them when kids aren't in school. So this work is going to start up as the 2 schools in the neighborhood are going to start back up. And the same thing goes with Rittenhouse Road. Like, how can we get better at this? Knowing that the budget is done in late November, early December, and how can we anticipate these touch points or these pinch points, I mean, and problem areas to fast track them somehow? But again, knowing COVID has thrown the screws into a lot of things.
Councillor Pachariva, would you like me to direct that question through the CAO?
Well, all the questions should go through the CAO and then to Mr. Graham. Sure. Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Kirkopoulos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the councillor, and I'm actually going to ask Walter to chime in and provide a little detail, but I wanted to go back to Councillor Brunet's question first and simply acknowledge that yes, there will be another opportunity, and we will be bringing that information back, councillor, and we will be making sure council's both aware and has an ability to finalize those selections. Moving to Councillor Pachariva's question. Some of the issues, councillor, were definitely COVID related, but we were at the privy of and really at the direction of NPEI. There were a lot of extensive negotiations earlier on in the process that saw NPEI come to the table in terms of costs, and so I think those were positive negotiations and deliberations that occurred. But a lot of this is also just timing of the works that needed to get done and the finalizing. But I know Walter can provide a much more in-depth answer.
Mr. Neubauer, would you like to respond as well?
Sure. So the hydro works are that they're scheduled, like we've had the design completed. MPI has been a really active partner in this. We've gone through their procurement process, and the tender is closed, and now it's just a matter of selecting through that process the contractor. We've been in contact with MPI, as well as IBI is involved heavily with this contract. So we're going to have constant oversight throughout the entire process for the hydro relocation. So we're going to be involved from day one. So does that answer your question, Councillor Pachariva?
No, not really. It's so I guess what I'm thinking is maybe looking at a piece of policy. So when we do a road reconstruction, we often do the detailed design the year before. So could this be a part of that detailed design to set up relocates to actually occur when school's not on? Right, and knowing that there's 2 schools in the area, and knowing that you've got to work with the NPI contractors and things like there's a long time frame here. Just trying to sharpen these things to get them to work to our advantage. So wondering if that's a possibility.
For sure, we can work in the future on other road reconstruction projects to try and better time relocation works. I know that MPI has got a lot of contracts throughout Niagara. So, but if we flag it early, we can definitely make that a part of our process moving forward.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pachariva. Trish, who is next?
We have Councillor McPherson.
Councillor McPherson, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as one of the local or one of the ward councilors, very, very pleased to see this report here tonight, and pleased that we are seeing a project that many thought wouldn't get off the ground for a long time. In the words of our CAO, a transformational project starting. I'm confident that once we get this started, that we will roll through the next couple of years, and we will transform the village of Jordan into what looks like a destination, a outstanding destination for our residents and also for our visitors. So I do have a couple of quick questions. One of the things that is a little bit of a bugaboo for me is the village town hall area, or the town square area. And in the report, it says Main Street south of the new Snur Lane is to be reconstructed to an urban cross section with a strong focus on accommodating pedestrians and cyclists while still being available to motorists. So maybe some clarity there as to what does still being available to motorists north of Snur Lane mean? Through you, Madam Chair, to, I guess, the CAO to redirect.
Through you, Madam Chair. I think Director Graham again and Walter could probably speak to these details. I think our intention was always to limit vehicular traffic in this area, but of course to allow for access to businesses that operate there to have deliveries. But Director Graham may be able to speak to it in terms of the specific reference in the report.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Mike, for those comments. And yeah, that's pretty much the answer. Is the and just to clarify, Councillor McPherson, you're referring to the section of Main Street south of Snur Lane back towards King Street, correct?
Sorry, south, yes.
Yes, okay, yeah. So that's so the objective of that area is to be a pedestrian area. We don't want the general public driving down into that area, but we do have to keep it, we do have to design it with the intent that we need to have delivery vehicles to go into that area to access businesses, emergency service vehicles and things like that. So that's really the intent in terms of vehicle access in that area.
Okay, very good. And that's I think been the way it's been all along. It just appeared in this report that there might have been a change to that, but I'm fine with that answer. And thinking, if I may, Madam Chair, just looking at some of the challenges that we've had recently with the region and their work on Regional Road 81 and some of the pushback by local businesses. And I'm expecting that the plan that's laid out for 19th Street and Main Street will maximize the opportunity for our businesses to continue to carry on business and minimize the impact. Thinking about the north end of Main Street and the timing of the construction there, and thinking that, when we look at the summer months being their prime months, is there a plan to have that end of the street done in the spring or in the fall, or is that under discussion? Through you, Madam Chair, to the CAO.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think, similar to the questions that we were answering earlier, our hope is always to work with and to align schedules so that they don't impact various things, whether it be things that impact our tourism sector or the various school years. And so we will always try to do our best to align schedules. I'll ask Walter to provide some details on what we're doing around timing specifically to make sure that it aligns as much as humanly possible I think with a number of other initiatives and projects that are going on later, we're going to be talking about the museum. And I think one of the things we'll hear is around stormwater management and the roadworks that are happening on Main Street and just the timing of those certain things. So timing is absolutely a key. We've seen that with some regional construction happening, but Walter may have some more details, and or Director Graham.
Go ahead, Mr. Neubauer.
Yes. So timing is going to be critical, and we know that it is a 3-year project. So the intent is for staff to be very aware of what is going on in the commercial areas specifically of this project, to build relationships with business owners, communicate on a regular basis, and figure out what the best timing is as we move through this project. I think it will be difficult to predict at this point every step of the way, but I think that communication has to be first and foremost with the project team, with the business areas. So we're going to make sure that business owners, residents know who to contact, and that we engage early before we even put a shovel in the ground with the contractor and residents to try and map out the most ideal schedule for everyone.
Thank you, Walter. And Madam Chair, just one final comment. I too look forward to seeing the final design come back through a report to council. So looking forward to that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Trish, is Councillor Reimer next?
Correct. Councillor Reimer's next, Chair Rajima.
Councillor Reimer, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Rajima. Thank you for this update, Director Graham and Walter Neubauer. Appreciate that. A question, and I know I've discussed this with Director Graham before, the water filling station at the corner of 19th and King Street. Is there any plans or discussions to have that moved somewhere else?
I can answer that question. I've actually recently met with the business owner, the operator of the Esso fueling station, and spoke with the local water distributor to talk about what their options are. So at this point in time, they are deciding and discussing whether or not they would like to continue operating that filling station. If they choose to, we have, I've explained to them what needs to happen, but the reality is that the filling station needs to be operating on the Esso site in its entirety so that it's not impeding traffic in the future. So they're aware of that. They're deciding what it is they want to do. And when they get back to us, we will work with them to help them as best as we can.
So just to follow up, Chair Rajima, if I may, to Walter. So they have, the ability to have that truck traffic and their fill up station on that same property. Like and at one time discussing with Director Graham, we weren't sure who actually owned it. So if they own that water station, they have enough room to do both on the same property and not impede 19th at all?
We've told them that we were going to work with them to make sure that that was what happened. So I believe that there is an option there to allow them to continue to operate. But we will make sure that that's the case. And they'll need to make whatever changes to their site to accommodate that.
Okay, that'd just be that certain times of the day that can be ugly if we got all this going on in the downtown there and making it look really great, and we got trucks kind of backing in and out of there. It's kind of an awkward spot. So I hope we can find some kind of resolution. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Rajima.
Thank you, Councillor Reimer. I think you were the last speaker on the list. Is that right, Trish?
That's correct, Chair Rajima.
Okay, if there's no more comments or questions from council, I do have a motion moved by Councillor Bernay. That council receive and file report PW 1420 Jordan Village Improvements Project Update. Trish, can you please call the vote?
Thank you, Chair. Please unmute yourselves as I call out your name. Councillor Bernay,
Yes.
Counselor McPherson.
Yes.
Counselor Mikulik is abstaining due to his declaration of interest to this item. Counselor Pachariva.
Yes.
Counselor Reimer.
Yes.
Counselor Ridgema.
Yes.
Counselor Russell.
Yes.
Counselor Timmers.
Yes.
And Mayor Easton.
Support.
And that motion is carried.
Oh, okay. I did notice somebody had their hand up, but I've taken it down. So thank you. We'll now consider item 6.8, and it's CS 0420, the Lincoln Museum and Cultural Center Strategic Plan. We have a staff presentation by Jessica Wilson, Cultural Development Coordinator. Ms. Wilson, you have 10 minutes. Please go ahead.
And give me one moment, everyone, to just share my screen. I'm going to be sharing her PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
Does everybody see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Sorry, just a moment. I'm trying to find my speaking notes. My whole screen has been taken up here. I believe that Shannon McKay, the director, was going to introduce the presentation. But I can go ahead and start. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Easton and members of council. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm really excited to be presenting the strategic plan for the Lincoln Museum and Cultural Center, home of the Jordan Historical Museum of the 20. It's the product of many months of hard work by staff and the community, which I hope comes across to you when reading the plan. During the presentation tonight, I'll be giving you an overview of the plan, and I'll also discuss some of the elements that went into creating it. There'll be time for questions at the end, should you have any. Next slide, please. A well-researched and comprehensive strategic plan will set the museum up for success. The objective of taking on this exercise is that there is a 5-year plan to guide decision-making for the museum as we prepare to move into our new home. The plan directs our focus to 6 strategic action areas with corresponding goals and specific actions. And it provides us with a new mission, vision, and value statement, which will communicate our purpose and what we want to achieve and the way in which we'll go about achieving it. Please keep in mind that this is a high-level document that will guide us towards achieving the goals and actions outlined within the plan. It's not an operations plan in that it doesn't prescribe how we go about achieving the goals and actions. That work will be laid out in greater detail in our annual operations plans. Next slide, please. Tonight, I will be asking you to adopt the plan and the strategic goals, actions, and recommendations included within. I'll also be asking you to adopt the new mission, vision, and value statements. Next slide, please. The plan was developed by staff with the help of TCI management consultants. It was informed by the community and stakeholder feedback, demographic and population data of the area, and by trends and best practices within the museum field. Next slide, please. The process of developing the plan began in October of last year. The entire process can be categorized into 4 phases. The first is the planning phase, where we strategized about how we would go about developing the plan. Phase 2 involved research and consultation. So the research aspect involved looking at the museum internally and externally at the things that would affect our operations. We conducted activities like reviewing the history of the organization, our policies, attendance, collection statistics, as well as looking what's working at other museums. Consultation involved engaging with stakeholders in a number of ways, including surveys, an open house, and a strategic planning retreat. Phase 3 was the analysis and recommendation phase, where we considered all the information we'd gathered to that point and produced the key issues report. We also developed our mission, vision, and values and the strategic goals and actions. Finally, phase 4 is the development, implementation, and reporting phase. And this is where we wrote the strategic plan, developed an operations plan, and determined how we'll report on progress over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. To recap, some of the reasons we determined the need for a plan included the fact that we're moving into the new museum space later this year, the desire to see the museum play an expanded role in community life, and the desire from the municipality to increase revenues and operate the museum more sustainably. It's also a requirement to have a strategic plan by the provincial government as a condition of eligibility for the Community Museums Operating Grant. Next slide, please. The strategic plan is a document that looks at the past, present, and future of the museum. It contains 6 strategic action areas and corresponding goals. There are 37 specific actions recommended within the plan, and there are 5 supporting appendices. We've also created an annual operations plan, which breaks out the actions we'll be working on in 2020 and 2021. This document more comprehensively details how we'll go about achieving the actions by laying out staff responsibility, timelines, priority, and tactics. There'll be a new operations plan every year, and it'll be used as an internal staff document. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we engage stakeholders throughout the development of the plan in a range of ways. We look to engage people representing a variety of stakeholder groups, in particular those profiled on this list. Next slide, please. The ways in which we engage stakeholders included a community survey, the results of which are included in the appendices. We held a museum open house community engagement session at the museum in October of last year. We had a strategic planning retreat, where we invited 25 key stakeholders to help develop the strategic plan, the action areas and the goals within it. We held one-on-one interviews with a number of community organizations. We held pop-up stakeholder engagement sessions, and we held a follow-up stakeholder survey related to the mission and vision. We consulted members of the community with institutional knowledge about the history of the museum, and we reviewed available materials regarding the Museum of the Jordan Historical Museum of the 20s history. Next slide, please. The planning retreat was facilitated by John Linton and Greg Young of TCI Management Consultants. They have an established practice within the cultural sector, helping organizations and governments with strategic planning. Next slide, please. The retreat happened on February 19th of this year. It included 25 stakeholders who we invited specifically to attend for their unique perspectives. This group included 2 members of council who were appointed when I came to you last year. It also included volunteers, partners, donors, staff, and funders. At the retreat, we discussed the key issues facing the museum, and together we identified strategies that address these issues. We identified and prioritized strategic action areas, goals, and actions, and we did the preliminary work in developing mission and vision statements. At the end of the retreat, our consultants produced a key issues report, which was essentially a summary of the main ideas that were discussed at the retreat. It also included some draft mission and vision statements. Next slide, please. The guiding principles of an organization define its motivation, guide its work, focus its energy and attention, and drive action. So after the retreat, staff worked to further develop options for the vision and mission statements based on what was discussed at the retreat. 3 options each were circulated to stakeholders as well as to council and SMT. They were asked to vote on which were the preferred statements. And so the vision and mission you see here and on the next slide were arrived at through that process. Next slide, please. Our mission statement is the institution's purpose. It's why we exist. The statement that our stakeholders chose as our mission is reflected on this slide. Next slide, please. The values we've established for the museum are based also on discussions that were had at the retreat and what we heard from our stakeholders. So these will inform and influence the way we go about our work at the museum. Next slide, please. The strategic action areas are the areas of focus for the museum over the next 5 years. The action areas came out of discussions that we had at the retreat. Each action area has corresponding goals and specific actions that are detailed in the plan. So there are 37 actions in the plan. And in this presentation, I'll discuss just some of those in further detail in the interest of time. Next slide, please. The first strategic action area is governance. So the first action item under governance is the establishment of a museum advisory committee with the defined terms of reference. This will be a committee of council that follows the same structure as other council committees like active transportation. The purpose of adding this additional layer to our governance structure is that the committee will enable us to increase our engagement with the community. It'll provide us with an opportunity to collaborate and gain input and expertise from community members. It'll also increase accountability of the organization to our board and to the public. The specific terms of reference for the group will be established with the help of the clerk and will be informed by research and consultation with our stakeholders. There was great discussion at the retreat, and we've already received valuable feedback from the Volunteer Association regarding their governance recommendations. This action item is a priority for staff, and we'll be coming back to you with the terms of reference for you to approve. Also, as a matter of good governance, we'll be providing formal reports to you on a regular basis in order to keep you better informed and engaged with updates, accomplishments, and milestones. So this will be in addition to the minutes and agendas of the advisory committee, which will be published and circulated. Next slide, please. The next action area is fundraising, revenue development, and diversification. Some of the specific action items include developing a long-term fundraising strategy, which will enable us to increase private sector funding, sponsorships, and planned annual giving. The museum's benefited from an exemplary and unique fundraising initiative on its behalf with the Volunteer Association's Heritage Gift Shop, which was initially the Sampler Gallery. In addition to the fundraising they do through the gift shop, they've taken on other fundraising initiatives, such as the Coming Home fundraiser, which was held in on the 20th of last year. So the expertise of some of these volunteers in fundraising is something that we hope to be able to draw on at the museum as staff to put together our own fundraising strategy. We'll also identify and apply for grants we're eligible for, which is something we've been doing well at over the past year. Next slide. This slide is just a snapshot of the grants we've applied for in the past year and those that we've been successful in being awarded. We haven't received any no's yet. Appendix A of your strategic plan document shows a list of current grants we're eligible to apply for as of 2020. So we'll continue to make this a priority in order to increase revenues, which enable us to take on new projects. Next slide, please. The next action area is exhibits, outreach, and programs. So our work in these areas will focus on animating the entire museum site, including the Fry House and the schoolhouse, in addition to the new museum. The museum site buildings will be open to the public and we'll contextualize and interpret them in order to bring the spaces to life for our visitors. We'll be working to raise awareness of the museum and all that it offers to the public by creating free opportunities for repeat visitors. Events like Pioneer Day are a great way to introduce people to the museum who've never been there before, as well as free family-friendly programming on statutory holidays and PA days. Introducing the community to the museum through these types of activities will encourage people to visit the museum on a regular and consistent basis. We'll be changing the exhibits at the museum multiple times a year, so our aim is that people come to the museum often to take advantage of what we're offering. The museum will have multiple exhibition spaces, which we intend to fill with a variety of exhibits that appeal to our diverse audiences, whilst at the same time emphasizing topics relevant to Lincoln's own history. Our exhibit curation will embrace the community's desire to see the museum's artifact collection, which has been in storage for a number of years. There'll be a new focus on developing programming that relates to current exhibit themes. Staff will develop a programming plan that engages different audiences on a monthly and recurring basis. So we're making sure that we're getting new people in consistently. The 3 opening exhibits that will be installed when the museum opens will all be curated in-house, and we'll use pieces of the collection as a focus. Finally, we'll continue to engage with our community by collecting data and feedback on our programs, attendance, and exhibits in order to report back to you and improve on our work. Next slide. The next area is collections and research. This action area provides an opportunity to develop and strengthen community partnerships with organizations such as Friends of Lincoln's History and the Jordan Historical Museum of the 20 Volunteer Association, because there's a lot of knowledge about the collection that hasn't been documented in a formal way. We'll work with individuals and groups such as these to add historical context to pieces of our collection where it's missing. Specific actions with respect to the collection are to continue to accession and deaccession artifacts per our policies. We'll be writing a collections development plan, which will be a document that guides our future collecting efforts. So this document will look at the current collection and consider the history of Lincoln in order to determine where we need to focus our collecting efforts and what sort of objects we'll be looking to add to the collection to really represent Lincoln. We'll also be making the collection accessible through a museum website in order to promote the collection, encourage research, and strengthen our loan program with other institutions. Next slide. The next strategic action area is marketing, access, and branding. As I mentioned, the feedback we received from the community was the leading factor in determining the action areas and the specific actions in the plan. One of the most eye-opening factors to come out of the survey is that the #1 reason that prevents people from participating in the museum's offerings is lack of awareness. And I think this is an easy fix with a number of measures. The first being to develop a clear and recognizable brand for the museum whilst consulting with our stakeholders. The brand will respect the history of the museum whilst honoring the past, present, and future. We'll also be developing a standalone museum website separate from the town's. This will be a way for us to reach the public, promote our programming and exhibits, and make the collection accessible to outside researchers. We recently got a grant by the Virtual Museums of Canada Community Stories program to develop an online exhibit. So you can expect to see virtual exhibits on our standalone website as well. Next slide, please. Community partnerships are another area that we'll be focusing on developing over the next 5 years. Specific actions we'll be accomplishing with respect to our partnerships are to develop a volunteer program and establish volunteer coordinator responsibilities within the current staff complement. We have a long list of individuals with a wide range of talents who've offered to volunteer their time and expertise to the museum, and we'd really like to take advantage of that. So we'll be delegating the role of volunteer coordinator to one of our staff, and we'll establish a volunteer program that makes the best of these people's expertise and abilities. We'll also cultivate community partnerships that enable the museum to reach extended and diverse audiences. They'll enable us to develop new programs, tell new stories, and offer new experiences. These partnerships with organizations such as the Jordan Historical Museum of the 20 Volunteer Association and Friends of Lincoln's History will be the foundation of the museum's commitment to the community. The input of longstanding volunteers will be critical to the museum's understanding of our own institutional history, as well as the history of Lincoln and the 20 Valley. Next slide, please.
Just a note, Jessica, you have been at 10 minutes.
Okay, I'm almost done. The development of the plan has been a collaborative effort. So these are some of the people that worked on the plan. Next slide. The plan will remain a draft until you adopt it. Next slide. In addition to the plan and the appendices, there's an operational plan for our strategic priorities. This is a breakdown of what we'll be working on over the next year, and we'll do a new plan annually. Next slide, please. The plan will help to guide our budget planning at the museum, but we won't be coming back to you to ask for any additional funds to accomplish these actions. Anything that goes above and beyond our annual budget will be fundraising for separately, such as the children's exhibit space. Next slide. The Cultural Development Coordinator and the Museum Advisory Committee, once it's established, will review the plan annually in Q1 to ensure that we're on track to meet our goals. We'll be providing you with an annual report on the progress. And as mentioned in the plan, it's not a static document, and therefore there may be changes over the next 5 years, but the annual report will note changes to the plan. Next slide. Finally, the recommendation to committee this evening is to endorse and adopt the museum strategic plan, including the recommendations and implementation strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Madam Clerk, are there any questions from council? I see Councillor Pachariva's hand up. Was he first?
He is first, Chair Ajima.
Go ahead, Councillor Pachariva.
Thank you, Chair Renchima. Thank you very much, Jessica, for the presentation. You're truly the expert in the field, and it looks like it's the plan is very well researched. It's a sound plan and gives me a high level of confidence. Just a couple questions. Have you, you're looking for a volunteer coordinator and a volunteer kind of program. Any thoughts of reaching out to the Trillium Foundation? When I was at TVTA, just before my arrival there, they had applied and received funding for a volunteer coordinator that actually set up a volunteer recognition program. So something at that time where we developed and we wanted to turn it over to the town. But at that point, the town didn't see any merit of it. So just wondering if that's on your radar.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Pachariva. Thank you very much for bringing that up. The Trillium Foundation grants are grants that I'm well aware of and look forward to applying to a grant when I return from my maternity leave. I had some other ideas for Trillium grants, but I'd be very happy to consider the role of volunteer coordinator under a Trillium fund.
Okay, and one more, Chairman Chima, if I may, as question. Go
ahead,
Jessica. I see that you. I mean, it's a very, very, very. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to say a big reach, wanting to achieve 17 of your recommendations in 2020. Just how realistic are those given COVID, given there's a couple that maybe are on the kind of on the target there. It's ambitious. I appreciate the ambitious. I appreciate the energy. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but just wondering how realistic.
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. Thank you for bringing that up. The timeline was developed in consultation with staff. The issue that we face is, and Councillor Michalak and Timmins would possibly remember this from our strategic planning retreat, there's a honeymoon period, or what our consultants call the honeymoon period, when we move into the new museum, where there'll be a lot of interest from the community about the museum. We'll hopefully see increased attendance depending on what happens with the COVID situation, but we really need to capitalize on capturing those visitors right when the honeymoon period's happening. It's a 2-year window we anticipate. So from my perspective, we don't really have an option to wait on a lot of these actions. It's a 5-year plan. It's fairly front loaded to the first 2 years, but most of those actions are ongoing. And I feel very confident that we can accomplish what we say we're going to accomplish.
Okay, excellent. I wish you all the very best. I mean, I think it's ambitious, but you're like you say, you're trying to capitalize on a honeymoon period. And I want to really, really, really thank you for identifying the hours and trying to change that and got that on your radar, because I mean, a lot of people are working during the days and it's evenings and weekends when they can visit. So thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pachariva. Who's next, Trish?
Mayor Easton is next, Chair Ajima.
Go ahead, Mayor Easton.
Madam Chair, when I indicated I wanted to speak, there wasn't anybody else on the list, but I would rather wait until other councillors have spoken.
Okay, that's fine. And so Trish, who is next after Mayor Easton?
Councillor Timmers.
Councillor Timmers, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Regima. And thank you, Mayor Easton. I prefer to that you go last as well. So I don't really have any questions. I'm just very, very happy to see this come forward. And the report is just outstanding. The all-day retreat was fantastic. You know, the number of people that were there that day for the whole day, it was extremely productive. And the consultants that were leading that day were just fabulous. So I don't really have any questions. I'm just very excited. I truly appreciate all the work that's gone into this, which is just huge. And it is very ambitious, and I have all the confidence that we will get there and that you will get there. And I can't wait. I cannot wait to see that the doors open on that new museum. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Timmers. Councillor Mikulik is next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Jessica Wilson. It's a pretty in-depth report. It took me quite a while to read it. I wanted to go back to a specific paragraph, and I pretty much had to reread the whole report to find it. Like, there's so much information in it. The question I have is with regards to environmental scan from TCI Consultants. It was noted about in paragraph 9 in their scan, increasing emphasis on accountability. So museums don't make money. Very few do. The question I have is currently, how do we measure, what are the metrics for determining whether or not we have an adequate, an above average, below average number of visitors? It was noted that we had 56 visitors, which is down from when it was in Jordan, 18%. So there was 7,000. Is that a lot of people? Is that a typical amount? How do you measure, what are the metrics to determine the expected or hoped for number of visitors?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Mikulik. That's a great question. The way I would look at it is comparing our visitor attendance to that which of similar sized museums in similar sized communities. I think we have the benefit of the Niagara region. It's a fairly populous area, but I would suggest that we could substantially increase the attendance when we move into the new museum and beyond the honeymoon period. We've seen a huge increase since being in Beam Street of drop-in visitors. So although Pioneer Day is smaller in scale in Beamsville, and the schoolhouse program isn't running to its maximum capacity, we have been building attendance through some of the programming initiatives we have. So I hope to be able to substantially increase the attendance numbers that you see in the environmental scan, and maybe set some new records against some of the other museums in the area as well.
And if I may ask one more question, I thought perhaps I've seen with like the PAC Center in St. Catharines with other various. Is there any consideration or possibility to we have volunteers of the museum, we have friends of the museum, is there any consider to have members of the museum? Or can you do that where you pay an annual membership, which would help support the museum as well? And also perhaps give us an idea of how many people are willing to pay to support through an annual basis. Is there any consideration? Has that been, I don't recall that ever being done or discussed.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Mikulik. That's a great question. Typically membership is used on museums with separate boards, and membership have vote on at the annual general meeting. it does require a payment, but this, given that our governance structure is through the municipality, typically municipal museums with this similar structure don't have memberships. That being said, I don't see why we couldn't have some kind of friends of group that would be willing to pay an annual fee for perhaps access to some special priority programming or newsletter, that kind of thing. But typically a membership is for a vote at an annual general meeting.
Okay, I appreciate that. My thoughts are, through you, Madam Chair, my thoughts are that to receive updates, to receive, you know, I don't know, it might be against municipal law to provide preferential admission to, you know, I don't, you know, because it's a taxpayer funded museum. I'm not sure of the details of that, but I know that I've seen some, you know, memberships, you know, $50 a year, or I don't know, 100, I don't know what sort of thing. So that's basically my two comments. Thank you very much. Great report.
So Trish, who is next? Thank you, Councillor Mikulik.
We have Councillor McPherson.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just echoing some of the comments through to Jessica. Really a very, very outstanding report. You know, when I looked at potentially looking at a strategy that was well over 100 pages, I thought, oh my goodness, what am I in for here? But when completing it, it was very easy to read, flowed very nicely. You know, you and your team and the stakeholders have hit, in my opinion, on all of the key items in a successful museum. I go back to one page where it talks about growing for the future of the museum in 2025. By 2025, the museum will be regarded as a model for community museums in Canada due to its successes in the areas of operations, collections, exhibitions, research, partnerships, and programming. And I mean, that is a tall task ahead, but you know, it looks like that you've put, or your team has put together a strong strategy and a strong plan. So again, we're here with you. You know, we want to see you succeed in this. You know, I would also question, and I know you answered this, but I would also question the volume of work that you've laid out for the next 18 months. And, you know, when looking at a 5-year plan, you know, I counted 27 of the 36, maybe it is 37 strategic priorities that you're going to start this calendar year, which to me is you know, I don't know what the description is. It's huge. It's daunting. So I understand that you're trying to maximize the opportunity and support you on that. I guess, you know, my suggestion would be identify those items that fit within that framework of taking full advantage of that window of the first year and a half. But, you know, realistically, I have not seen a strategy that would lay out this many items and be effective on all 27 of the 37 items in less than 4 months, you know, and then to get them implemented in less than 18 months. You know, you've got a 5-year plan, make it a 5-year plan. That's my suggestion to you, so that if you are picking off 5 or 6 or 7 key items that you need to do this year, do them and get them done and move on. You know, that's been the way, you know, I've approached strategies like this in the past. Is if you're trying to eat the elephant, you know, all at once, it's going to leave you frustrated. So I guess I would echo Councillor Pachariva's question around how you're going to do it, and understand where you are right now being on leave, and you know, that time passes so quickly. So again, fabulous report. Excited. I was down at the site on Friday, and you know, it even gets me more excited when you can see the building, you can see it materialize, you can see you know, the end of the construction in sight. And I know there's some other things that have to happen over time, but you know, I'm really excited about the move from the Beamsville site back to Jordan. So congratulations on where you're at thus far. I think it's a huge undertaking for you and for the short time that you've been with us to get to this point. And again, we're with you on this, and we want to see you succeed. So that would be my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Through you, Chair, to Councillor McPherson. I really appreciate the feedback, and I agree. Like I said to Councillor Pachariva, it is a tall order, but just to ease your anxiety a little bit with respect to the timeline, a lot of these recommendations we've begun work on already. Things like the museum website, things like the exhibitions plan. We've been working on those for the better part of this year as a matter of our operations. So although they're being recommended in the plan, we have made considerable headway on a lot of the items in the plan that I've put for accomplishment by 2021.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kirkopoulos wanted to speak further to Councillor Mikulic's early question, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kirkopoulos.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be incredibly brief. I wanted to just highlight Councillor Mikulic's question around revenues, and I think make the comment or you know, acknowledge what the councillor is saying, in that, and Jessica's talked about it. We often do rely on major gifts. We rely on things like admissions and grants, memberships, as we just highlighted today, and other subsidies, and we've been successful in a lot of those applications. But that doesn't mean cultural institutions are barred in any way from exploring other revenue streams. And I think, as we've often said, museums serve the public and protect our culture and our history and our heritage, often in perpetuity. And so while we don't necessarily generate profit the same way as businesses do, it is a model that we'll look to in the future. And I think, as the plan says, we do want to be that model that people look to us in the future and say, this is how to run a very successful museum. So I did want to add that brief comment, and then we'll turn it back over to Jessica and Council for your questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. CAO. I don't see anybody else wanting to speak, and I know that Madam Mayor wanted to speak last, so I'm going to turn it over to Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I didn't want to interfere with anyone's individual questions. I certainly echo everyone's remarks about the quality of this report. I don't really share concerns about the staff being able to complete the work that they've laid out. And I say that entirely because of the professional expertise that exists within that team. It's like we have never had before. And because of the way they organize their work, I really am not concerned. I know that if they weren't able to complete something, I'm sure that we will hear from them. I think this, we've already seen some evidence of their capabilities and their teamwork. It's all reflected in the policy revisions that we've approved, which are really setting us up well for them to achieve their goals. So Jessica, to you, I want to thank you very much for the report. I spent probably more time on the strategic plan than anything else. There is going to be a significant transition, council members, to the new building. There's going to be new processes and accountabilities that are, some of which are going to be the jurisdiction of council before the building opens, as I indicated to you earlier today, and others, of course, with the advisory committee. So I have a question of you, Jessica, and that is really around the program model. And it's pretty clear that you're really enhancing the education and relevance in order to get people to come back over and over and over again. There was a mention about the authenticity, and so really it's the authenticity of programs that I believe that you were referring to. However, I don't see, in encouraging that interest, I don't see that the museum is a daycare center. The programs that you're talking about, I see all of them connected very strongly, as is the school program, to the artifacts that are there and to the history. And so I'm curious to know what that separation is between the Parks and Recreation culture and the family events, and also the museum culture, which really looks at the artifacts and the programming and education that goes along with them. Can you help me with that? Is there a separation, or do you see it as one?
Through you, Chair, to the Mayor. I hesitate to refer to the past couple of years of programming at the museum as an example of what we're going to be doing going forward. What I hope to initiate at the new museum with the help of our staff here is programming that is relevant to the museum, its collection, its history, the history of Lincoln, but it also engaging to young people, adults, and families alike. So that for the past couple of years, we've been very good at getting children into the museum, which has been wonderful. It hasn't always been necessarily relevant to history and culture, but we have been developing relationships with those families, and we see those faces coming back again and again, which is wonderful. What I hope to do is bring those families to the new museum, entice them with programming that Pioneer Day, PA Day activities, family-free activities for children, so that they really maintain that relationship with the museum going forward. Examples of programs that you can expect to see at the museum going forward would be related to the exhibits. So we have a Fracta gallery, as you've all know, having read the report. One of the programs that I hope to implement is a sort of paint night, but learn to paint Fracta. So connecting those historical ideas with fun activities that do appeal to all audiences. I hope that answers your question.
It is. You did a good job, and I appreciate that very much. Madam Chair, I have another question, and I'm not sure if Jessica, I think that maybe Mike is going to have to answer this question. Throughout this document, there are many names, and I'm going to categorize them as working names, because in the letters patent from 1953, there is the museum has a name. But as we all know, we are also looking at heritage gateways in our community. We have one at Beamsville end that related to Jacob Bean. We have one from within the Jordan area. So my question is that in approving this report, are we indirectly approving a change in the name? And if that's the case, then we're going to have to make some changes, because I couldn't support such a thing tonight. So, Madam Chair, to Mr. CAO, because I wouldn't want to burden Jessica with the answer to that question.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the Mayor. I think oftentimes, and Council will be aware and familiar with this, the town often uses names to refer to various locations or various projects. And I know Jessica can absolutely answer the questions on the letters patent. She probably knows them a little bit better even than I do. But I think my comment to the mayor would be, there's a legal name on the letters patent, and that remains the official legal name of the museum. If the town chooses to refer to something else, as we are in this document in terms of a heritage gateway, as the mayor's indicated, we can do that. An amendment to the letters patent could be affected later on if council wishes, and that's something we would work on with our legal team and our legal staff. And I'd be happy, I think, to bring something back in more detail for council and to look at that particular element of the conversation. I know we've had a number of meetings both internally and externally with our funders as well as with council on the names. And I think bringing it back to committee, looking at how we incorporate signage on the site and a number of other things are things that staff would like to undertake and definitely, as I indicated, bring back to committee at a future time. But this report, I think specifically to answer your question, Madam Mayor, does not approve a name change.
Okay, thank you very much. So Madam Chair, we can expect then that the official name at the moment will remain as it is on the letter patent. However, I want to expand my question a little bit just to make sure that we don't get going down some areas that we don't want to be. And that is in terms of branding and icons, the working names, and the validations of all of those by council prior to any informal changes being made. Am I making a fair assumption?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would say, Mayor Easton, that is a fair assumption that those will be things we bring back either to a subcommittee of council, to a committee of council, or to all of council.
Okay, well, I'm suggesting, Mr. CEO, Madam Chair, that these things come to council because of this major transition that we're going through. Okay, well, I appreciate that. I want those items to be noted. I also want to congratulate all the staff who worked on this document, and Jessica, for your expertise and what you brought to this. I just can't imagine how we would have ever expected to see such a comprehensive report, except through some of the major internal changes that have taken place with staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Trish, are there any other hands up?
There are not, Chair Ajima.
Okay, there's no more questions or comments. So I have a motion moved by
Mayor Easton.
Yes, there we are. Thank you. I have a motion moved by Mayor Easton that council receive for information report CS 0420 regarding the Lincoln Museum and Cultural Center, home of the Jordan Historical Museum of the 20 draft strategic plan. Endorse and adopt the Lincoln Museum and Cultural Center, home of the Jordan Historical Museum of the 20 strategic plan, including the recommendations and implementation strategy within. Madam Chair, Madam Clerk, can you call the vote, please?
Absolutely.
Madam Chair, it's my intention to speak to the motion, and I have an amendment.
Go ahead, Madam Mayor.
Could I ask the Deputy Clerk to put the amendments up on the screen, please?
Just one moment.
Madam Chair, and members of council, the report is quite comprehensive. It makes it very clear that there are forward movement, and there are areas that council needs to consider before we we get too far down the road. And since September and October are going to be important time frames, I want to make sure that that we get some more activities in the works.
Madam Mayor, can I ask for clarification? Is this an amendment to the motion that's on the table?
It is an amendment.
And Madam Clerk is going to share her screen?
Yes.
Okay,
I'll be
thank you.
sharing my screen now. I've bolded the amendment in addition to the motion that's in the report. Give me one second. And there it is in its entirety. Would you like me to read that, Madam Mayor?
Yes, if you don't mind, and then I'll speak to the added elements.
No problem. So the main motion as we heard it, or as we see it, but I will speak to the amendment. So the amendment is in addition that staff be directed to bring forward a report to the September or October meeting of Community Services and Infrastructure Committee that outlines the general fundraising plans and framework to support the completion of any portions of the project not covered by the capital dollars already identified and assigned, and that a terms of reference for the Museum Advisory Committee be brought forward to the September or October meeting of Community Services and Infrastructure Committee, and that council approve 2 councillors as consistent with other advisory committees to sit on the new Museum Advisory Committee, and that the following 2 councillors be named to sit on the advisory committee, Councillors John Pachariva and Mike Mikulik, and that council bring back, or that staff bring back a report outlining the process and timelines for the timely recruitment of public members for the advisory committee, and that the Museum Advisory Committee elect a chair and vice chair at their first meeting, and that this occur prior to the official opening of the museum.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Madam Chair, the intention of the first amendment is to ensure that the all-important fundraising activities get started as soon as possible. It was very clear from the report that it isn't the intention of the museum staff to come forward looking for additional operating support. And therefore, to have this in place as soon as possible is very important. It was also identified as being important in the role of the advisory committee. And informally, I believe that it is the intention of the Museum Gift Shop to continue providing financial support as long as they possibly can. As far as the terms of reference for the Museum Advisory Committee, the report that we saw tonight, I really compare it very closely to the Transportation Master Plan, except that in our case, this report is ready and is prepared and ready to support the transition to the advisory committee. I think that's a really ideal situation for us to find ourselves in, striking the committee and then laying out the work plan, et cetera, with all of the associated documents that led us to the position that we are right now, I think is really very ideal. In the document, we talked about the importance of having local knowledge. We also talked about a very direct relationship to the Tourism Master Plan. I utilized my prerogative as the mayor to suggest 2 names to sit on the advisory committee, and I have checked with both councillors, and they have confirmed that they are that they will commit themselves to this role and are very interested. The last 2 pieces are in relation to the getting the advisory committee going. I really believe that it is ideal that this advisory committee and the recruitments are in place as soon as they possibly can be arranged. I spoke with the clerk and the CAO extensively about this today. And that is why you see this this piece in the motion. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay, Madam Clerk, I read the motion and now we're seeing an amendment to that motion. How do we deal with this with council?
As it's a friendly amendment, we could go one of two ways. I could see a show of hands from all of council and we can agree to it and then just read the main motion and include that amendment. Or I can call each councillor's name and we can go through that on that amendment, vote on the amendment, and then vote on the main motion. So if anyone would like to see a show of hands, I'm not sure, or if we'd like to just go the traditional route.
Why don't we go through the traditional route? Thank you.
Perfect. No problem. So I've read that amendment and I will be calling your names out. So please unmute your mic. Oh, I see two hands.
Oh, I think we were going to go through calling out each name, I think. Yeah,
Calling out each name.
I think that's the best plan.
In that case, I'll proceed. Councillor Brunei?
Trish, if I may, I mean, can we not speak to the proposed amendment? Is that not what we want to do now?
Oh,
Yeah, I think Councillor McPherson, the idea now is to just accept the amendment and then speak to it. Is that the procedure, Madam Clerk?
no, I wasn't sure if the show of hands was actually for showing of hands of voting. So please go ahead and do speak to the amendment.
So do we have Councillor McPherson first, Trish?
Correct. I had Councillor McPherson first, actually.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor McPherson.
So thank you, Madam Chair. So there's a lot there. There's an awful lot there that the mayor has presented to us. And it's very difficult to then digest what was just said and make a decision on it. We've got a 100-page document here that includes many of the items that the mayor is recommending. I understand, her sense of urgency, and I think that is worth discussing. But I would much rather see this as a notice of motion, and that we come back after we're able to discuss, many of these items that are on there as to what the impact of that is and what that means. And then we can all, I don't want to lose it by just, throwing it out on the table and potentially losing it. So I think in my view, it makes sense to not have this as an amendment, but have as a notice of motion. And then we approve or not the motion that is on the table. So those are my thoughts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. I have Councillor Russell next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I concur with Councillor McPherson. I would like to see it as a notice of motion. I think there's a couple things in there that stand out for me. Bringing forward the terms of reference after the fact of appointing two councillors that, again, the appointment itself is a little bit different than the way we have appointed committee members in the past. It has always been a little bit more democratic, so I have a concern about that, but I would like to see the terms of reference of the committee before we start looking at selecting members.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. So if anybody else, there's nobody else to speak. So Madam Clerk, we have two committee members, council members that would like to, that are not in favor of considering the friendly amendment. What do we do next?
So either Mayor Easton withdraws the amendment and it'll be brought forward as a notice of motion at council, or we vote on the amendment. And that is up to Mayor Easton, of course, to proceed or withdraw.
Madam Chair?
Mayor Easton.
If we bring the, if the motion stands and we vote on it and the motion is lost, what is the process, Madam Clerk, for bringing any of this information forward in the future?
I would still assume a notice of motion to council would be the correct procedure after the fact.
Okay. Okay.
So Madam Mayor, would you like to, you have two choices,
Withdraw.
withdraw the friendly amendment and bring it forward as a notice of motion. Is that what you'd like to do? Or
I'm
move
going-
forward as it is?
No, I'm going to bring it forward as a notice of motion. I think these items are far too important to have two members of council with concerns.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I've read the motion, so we can move forward with it without the friendly amendment. I've read it. Madam Clerk, can you please call the votes?
I may, but I do see Councillor Russell's hand up and I wasn't sure if he wanted to speak just before. Oh, no. Okay, that was a mistake. Okay, in that case, we will consider the main motion without the amendment. And if you can take your mics off mute as I call your name. Councillor Brunei,
For.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Mikulik,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Rinjima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
Mayor Easton,
Support.
and that motion is carried.
Thank you. So Madam Clerk, if Mayor Easton wants to bring forward the notice of motion, how do we do that right now? How do we do that? And at what time in the agenda do we do that?
We'll be putting that forward, as I understand it, to the council agenda as a notice of motion.
Yeah. It's my
So
understanding.
clerk's
Madam-
office will take care of that.
Thank you. So that concludes the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee agenda. We will now rotate to Chair McPherson to assume the chair at this time for the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda.
Thank you, Chair Regime. Do we need a break?
I think that's an excellent idea. Thank you for suggesting that.
Do we need 10 minutes? I hate to hold people in the queue, but we are 2 hours in. So I would say, or 2.5 hours, I would say 8:40, we reconvene. Does that fit for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, 8:40 it is. Be
Thank
late.
you. I will pause the live recording now.